Hello, and thank you for participating in the Know Your Food webinar brought to you by Pop Spring Wellness. My name is Elizabeth Beck. I am the Communications Coordinator at Pop Spring Wellness. And co-presenting with me today is Jacob Anderson, the Communications Intern at Pop Spring this summer. As a reminder, handouts have been provided to you via email. In addition, we will be holding a Q&A session during the last 10 to 15 minutes of the webinar with RN Health Coach, Barbara Klinner. So, with that being said, we do encourage you to use the chat box feature on the right side of your screen to type any questions as they may come to mind throughout the webinar, and then we will answer them at the end with Barb. Finally, this webinar was made possible today through the Communications Internship Program. So today's feature is strictly a pilot project that we are hoping to launch more regularly in the future, depending on the feedback that is received. An evaluation will be sent out to you via email in the coming days, and we do encourage you to complete this so that Pop Spring can work to establish this program a bit more and other health educational opportunities such as this one in the future. As an overview for today, we will be talking about what all natural really means, especially since you will see this on food labels quite a bit, the dangers and concerns with sugar consumption, and what it really means to be organic. So on that note, I pass it on over to Jacob.
All right, so to start with our first topic, which is the all natural, you'll see these words a lot in your grocery stores because consumers have really started to push for their foods to be more natural, healthier, more nutritious. So a lot of products have started to use these words, but they don't always mean what they imply because even though they might market themselves as being all natural, a lot of the products within them are far from natural. Also, the FDA does not have strict definitions or guidelines on when you can use words like all natural. But the statement that they have released is as follows. From a food science perspective, it is difficult to define a food product that is natural because the food has probably been processed and is no longer the product of the earth. That said, FDA has not developed a definition for use of the term natural or its derivatives. However, the agency has not objected to the use of the term if the food does not contain added color, artificial flavors, or synthetic substances. So that's really the basis of what the FDA has on that, which is basically not much as long as the product doesn't have added color and was at one time a product of the earth, then they can use the words all natural. But that doesn't take into account the processing because a lot of these natural sources or where these products are coming from undergo a lot of processing that is similar to artificial flavors, and that strips the products and the ingredients from their nutritional value and kind of takes away that health benefit. Some of these common food offenders that use natural but may not be as healthy as they might imply. The first one we're going to talk about is yogurt. Yogurt has heavily processed sweeteners and are especially in flavored varieties. Often flavors and heavily processed flavors are added to give it a bright, healthy aesthetic. And you might be wondering how can colors be added if they're allowed to use natural? Well, a lot of times if you look at a nutrition label under the ingredients, you'll see it called out as just natural flavors. And under that umbrella, a lot of times companies will put things into their foods that are considered natural, but really they have no nutritional value. They just kind of add a boost of color, maybe a little bit more blue or red to something so that it looks healthier and brighter when really it's not adding anything to it. So if we zoom in on a typical nutritional fact, we'll see it circled there that the sugars in this is 26 grams, and that's very high. So we would recommend looking for yogurts that are lower in these sugars because you want to keep your healthy eating healthy. Moving on to non-dairy and soy cheeses. These cheese substitutes often have added colors and flavors similar to the yogurt that we discussed. Also, these soy cheeses contain an ingredient called carrageenan, which is a processed carbohydrate that often upsets consumers' stomachs. And this kind of defeats the purpose of eating soy cheese because a lot of the market for these products are people who are lactose intolerant. So the dairy varieties are upsetting their stomach, so they turn to soy. And if that's upsetting their stomach, then it's kind of not helping them out very much. And also, soy is one of the most commonly genetically modified crops available, with 94% of soy grown in the US being GMO. So, a lot of that is scientifically altered and isn't really a natural product of the earth like it might imply if it were to use words like all natural. And here we'll see the carrageenan in the ingredients of a soy or non-dairy cheese. And that is that product that would maybe upset your stomach. Moving on to bottled iced tea. A lot of tea brands use high amounts of sugar or high fructose corn syrup. If the tea is flavored, there's rarely actual fruit in the ingredients, but rather you'll see natural flavors, which again involve that high processing and could really be anything. So if you get an iced tea that says strawberry iced tea, you're very unlikely to get actual strawberries in there unless you see strawberries in the ingredients, because if they just say natural flavors added, that could really be anything, not necessarily the flavor that you're after. So if we were to zoom in on a typical nutritional fact, on the right-hand side in that black box, you'll see that there's 33 grams of sugar in this brisk iced tea. And that is very high, so you may want to try to look for iced tea brands that are lower in sugar or maybe unsweetened. So just keep an eye on that. And on the right-hand side, this is a nutritional fact, an ingredient list for a typical natural tea brand. But you'll see in the ingredients that there is no actual fruit called out here. It just says natural flavor, and again, that could really be anything and not necessarily a fruit. Moving on to our last common food offender, honey. The average jarred honey in the average grocery store have all undergone various levels of processing. And the Food Safety News reports that most honey isn't actual honey because the natural pollen has often been completely filtered out. And as long as it's in a bare bottle, people are usually convinced that they're getting a honey product. So we recommend buying honey from farmers markets to ensure that you're getting that pollen still in the honey, because it's that pollen that gives honey its immune boosting and allergy fighting benefits. Whereas if you just buy any honey from the grocery store, you may not get those benefits, and rather you're just adding syrup to your foods. And speaking of sugar, we're moving on to our second topic, which is the dangers of sugar. Something to keep in mind about this is that on a nutritional label, there is no upper limit on sugar, so a company can add as much sugar as they want into an ingredient, and the government can't step in and say, that's too much, lower that. So really, a product can have as much sugar as it wants in there, and they can add as much as they want. However, a law was recently passed that requires companies to put the percent daily value on the label, just like sodium and fats, or anything else that you'll see in a nutritional label. And this percent daily value is based on the recommendation that the daily intake of calories from sugar should not exceed 10% of their total calories. So if we were to move into a Harvard study that was recently conducted, they found that sugar raises your risk of heart disease. And the full scale of how sugar harms the heart isn't exactly clear. They just found that there was a correlation, but they do know that sugar boosts blood pressure, which overworks the heart, and it also stimulates the liver to dump fats into the bloodstream. To continue with the Harvard study, it was a 15-year study that found that participants who took in 25% or more in their daily calories as sugar were twice as likely to die of heart disease as those who consume the recommended 10%. And 1 in 10 Americans are eating the 25% mark, so that puts about 10% of the population at this risk. And this held true regardless of age, sex, physical activity level, and BMI. And sweetened beverages account for 1/3 of our added sugar that Americans consume, and that can be soda, energy drinks, sports drinks, anything like that. And other notable sources are fruit drinks and frozen yogurt account for a lot of the added sugar that we consume. And in order to test if sugar was really the bad guy in this that was causing this heart disease, or rather simply a lack of heart-healthy foods in a diet, they measured the Healthy Eating Index, which shows how well diets match up with federal dietary guidelines. So basically it measures how well somebody eats based on the government's recommendations, so how many servings of fruit you get, how many servings of vegetables, protein, anything like that. And they found that regardless of these index scores, so regardless of how healthy people were eating, anyone who ate more sugar had higher cardiovascular mortality. Also, the AHA recommends that women eat less than 100 calories from sugar, which is about 6 teaspoons, and men eat less than 150 calories from sugar, which is 9 teaspoons. And to put that in perspective, a 12-ounce can of soda has 9 teaspoons of sugar in it, typically. So that puts men already capped off just from that one can of their total daily intake of sugar, and it puts women well over their intake of sugar for the day. Moving on to a common misconception about sugar, you'll see on a lot of products in the grocery store that they market that they use all natural sugar, or that they use, or you might see that they market it as no high fructose corn syrup, and that they use sugar instead. But this is a bit of a misconception because there really isn't much of a difference between sugar and high fructose corn syrup when you get down to the molecular level. Sugar is 50% fructose and 50% glucose, and high fructose corn syrup is just a little bit higher in fructose with 55%, leaving 45% in glucose. So what this means is that really there isn't much of a difference between the two things. It's just that your body uses the glucose and kind of the fructose, and that is dispensable. But again, there's only just a little bit more fructose in high fructose corn syrup. And in a 2010 review of this science, a researcher at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland named Luc Tappy, who is considered by biochemists who study fructose to be the world's foremost authority on the subject, said that there's not a single hint that high fructose corn syrup was more harmful than other sources of sugar. So the main takeaway from this is that a healthy diet should include fewer foods with added sugar and high fructose corn syrup or fructose, and decreasing your intake of one by replacing the other and thinking that that's improving your diet really isn't the case, because you should try to reduce your sugar and high fructose corn syrup and not simply replace your high fructose corn syrup with sugar. With that said, I'll turn it back over to Elizabeth to discuss organics.
Thank you, Jacob, for that overview. So now we will shift into learning more about organic foods, and this is especially important since the term organic is generally known as healthier and better for you, but when you're out grocery shopping and you have an apple in one hand and you have an organic apple in the other, and they're both red, they're firm, they're shiny, it can really be tough to see the value in buying that organic apple over the non-organic one, especially since it usually is more expensive. So this is why it's important to understand the true benefits of buying organic, and there are quite a few. Organic farming practices are designed to encourage soil and water conservation and reduce pollution. And a really good example of this is the use of natural fertilizers to feed soil and plants, and also utilizing crop rotation or mulch to manage weeds. So through this, you're better able to conserve farmland, and it's a little bit more environmentally sound as well, especially since Organic farmers' primary strategy is prevention, and they really truly feel that by building healthy soils, healthy plants are better able to resist disease and insects. If it's absolutely needed for pest control, organic growers can try options such as insect predators, mating disruption, traps and barriers, things like that. However, if those still fail, the grower can apply a botanical or other non-persistent pesticide from the USDA National List of Approved Substances to try to make that work as well. What's nice is that botanicals are derived from plants and they are broken down quickly by oxygen and sunlight, which is a better choice for organic crops and organic farming in general. Finally, it keeps healthy eating truly healthy, especially since you're getting that food in one of its most basic forms through minimal pesticide use and for that product being non-GMO. And it's also very minimally processed too. So if you're wondering how this is all regulated, especially since we know that it seems like a lot, you'll be happy to know that the FDA has established an organic certification program that all organic foods need to meet. So there are a few things to note, however. Number one being that producers who sell less than $5,000 a year do not need to be certified organic. However, they do still need to follow the FDA organic standards. For example, if you go to the farmer's market and you're talking to a farmer who claims that their product is organic, as long as that farmer doesn't make more than $5,000 a year in revenue, they may be telling you the truth. However, in that instance, we do recommend that you talk to that farmer a bit more to learn more about their growing standards, just to make sure that they're being honest, and also that you are fully understanding where your food is coming from and how it's being grown. Next, the terms organic and natural are not interchangeable. And this is something that Jacob touched on earlier as well. Marketing teams really want to gain your trust as a consumer by using words like all natural. However, they mean completely different things from the term organic. So when you are buying your foods organically, just make sure that it actually says the word organic on the package and that it also carries this seal or a similar seal like it. Finally, the FDA is the only organization that has these strict standards for organic food. No other organizations do, so it's good to pay attention to your food to make sure that it carries the organic seal. Once again, just really comes into reading the food label and understanding how your food is made and where it's coming from. So if you're thinking along to yourself that you might want to start buying organic products, it's important to note that words really do matter. So you need to read the food label. If you see the words 100% organic, it means that all ingredients are organic in that product or they're made from organic materials with minimal processing. So if you're looking to be really strict with purchasing organic, these are the words you're going to want to look for. Next, if a food says organic on the label, it means that 95% or more of the ingredients are organic, but that does leave about 5% or less of the materials being non-organic. This is still pretty good, but once again, it really comes down to how strictly you want to buy your products and kind of transition into eating more organically. If a food label has the words made with organic ingredients, what that means is that 70% or more of the ingredients are organic. However, that does leave about 30% of the ingredients coming from other materials. So branching off of that one, there are a few things to note. There are foods that have 70% or less organic materials, and those products are not allowed to use the word organic. However, they may use words like all natural, free range, or hormone free to try to encourage you to buy the product for being more natural than the competitors and to kind of trick you into thinking that it actually is organic or more natural. However, that's not the case. Finally, all three of these levels, whether it's 100, 95, or 70%, are allowed to carry the FDA seal. So the wording is what's really going to be most important when you're reading that food label and when you're figuring out how many products you would like to buy organically. So at this point, if you're seriously starting to consider buying some of your food organic, but you also want to stick to your weekly grocery budget, we have a solution for you. The Environmental Working Group, or EWG, created two lists called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. And the produce listed on the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 range from foods containing the most amount of pesticide residue to the least amount. So the list that we are highlighting first is the Clean 15. And if you want to start buying more produce organic, but like we mentioned, you still also want to stick to your weekly budget, these are the foods that contain the least amount of pesticide residue, so you are a bit safer to buy these non-organic. As you can see, a lot of foods on this list have a protective barrier, like avocados and sweet corn, which you don't eat. And that's why those two top the list, because they don't have a lot of pesticide residue and you don't need a lot of pesticides to have them grow healthfully. Next, we move on to the Dirty Dozen list, which contains the produce that has the most amount of pesticide residue. Now, once again, there are a few things to note here. Apples are number 1 on the list, and they have topped this list now for several years. And when you start to think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Apples typically have more pesticide residue because of the chemicals that are applied to the crops before and after harvest so that they can preserve the apples and the plants for longer. Since this fruit is typically more in high demand, growers really strive to keep up with the selling rates, thus making those farmers and the growers use more chemicals to ensure that the plants are staying healthy and that they're still able to produce fruit. So needless to say, if you do want to start buying organic and apples are regularly on your shopping list, we recommend that you do buy this product organic. Also, as you can see, nectarines and snap peas are on this list if they are imported. Nectarines came in at number 8 and snap peas came in at number 11. And the reason why this is noted is because the research done by the EWG showed sharply different results between these foods if they were either domestic or imported. So once again, this really plays into why it's so important to read food labels and understand where your food is really coming from. So obviously you can't look at a nectarine or a snap pea and know where it came from. So to help you out, a lot of times the stickers that they put on produce, that will tell you what country that fruit or vegetable was grown in, or you can always talk to a grocery worker, or you can read the signage by it too, and it usually will give you that answer. Finally, recently added to this list were hot peppers and kale or collard greens. So it doesn't really make this a Dirty Dozen list anymore. It's really the Dirty Dozen plus 2. But kale is generally known as a superfood and just has endless amounts of health benefits for you. But if kale is another regular on your grocery list, you might want to consider buying this one organic from now on, especially if you are concerned about the amount of pesticide residue on it. You don't want the health benefits of kale to be battled with the pesticide residue. It's just not a good thing. So, something to note for future buying. So, on that note, we hope from this overview on what organic really means, you will be able to make more well-informed decisions while you grocery shop. So now I will turn it back on over to Jacob.
All right, so today we have learned that natural doesn't always mean natural. We learned that sugar poses greater concerns than perhaps we thought before, and we learned all about organic eating and how to do it on a budget. We hope you found this information helpful and hopefully a little interesting, and thanks so much for joining us today. Now we will turn it over to RN Health Coach Barb Klinner for about 10 minutes to answer your most pressing health questions. And this is where we're going to utilize the chat function. So as anything pops into your head, go ahead and type it in there, and we will have Barb answer all of your questions.
Mentioned in the organic section was the health benefits of kale. Once again, didn't really have a lot of time to go into that, so Barb, if you want to just kind of explain the health benefits of kale a bit more?
Sure. Well, kale has a lot of vitamins. It's super packed with vitamins like A, C, K. There's a lot of minerals too, a whole plethora of minerals as a matter of fact, and it's very low calorie. Again, it can contain high levels of pesticides, so it may be beneficial to choose organic kale. But a cup has only about 40 calories and 3 grams of protein and lots of fiber. So that low calorie content actually makes it very nutrient dense. The antioxidants in kale can help counteract some oxidative damage, and that's really our body's reaction to oxygen and the cells producing energy. And they think that is a leading driver of aging and disease, maybe even including cancer. And some of those byproducts of that oxidative damage are counteracted by kale. So it definitely deserves its reputation as a superfood, but perhaps more so if it's organic kale.
All right, we do have another question from Kelly, and she asks if we should avoid sugar, but artificially sweetened yogurt has artificial ingredients. Which should we buy?
Boy,
it's a very good question.
It is. You could stand there at the yogurt aisle and be in a quandary for quite a while. You can look for low sugar options. So that probably is your best choice. The artificially sweetened yogurt, contains the artificial ingredients. So it really depends on what your personal health practices are in using artificially sweetened products. And of course, there's a lot in the news too about the damage that those can cause, or really the unknown health implications of artificial sweeteners. And there's so many out there, and they're studying all of them with no real conclusion yet. It probably would be your best option to look at an unsweetened type of yogurt and sweeten it yourself with the natural sugars that are in fruit. Fructose that is available from sugars are combined at least with the fruit of the fiber. So they're slowly digested and they enter your bloodstream more slowly, and it's felt like the health implications aren't as drastic negatively as having that fast sugar surge. So I would recommend unsweetened yogurt and sweeten it naturally with fruit.
All right, very good question. For any of the other callers on the line, if you have any additional questions that came to mind, maybe something kind of sparked in your mind, listening to Barb's response, we encourage you to type them in now.
Oh, I do have another comment.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
As long as we're on the topic of nutritious foods.
Go for it.
Especially multigrain crackers. You see that on so many labels and so many products. Multigrain crackers are thought to be better, but they're actually made from white flour. It's really a misleading buzzword, because what you need to look for are grains that are actually whole grain, meaning that it still contains the fiber content of that whole grain kernel. So if you see multigrain, the product is no better than those that are made really from refined grains like white flour. So just another little tidbit or tip, look for that word whole grain rather than multigrain.
That's a good tip. All right, wonderful. And while Barb was finishing up those concluding thoughts, we didn't see any other questions come in, which is totally a-okay. So we will go ahead and conclude this webinar, and we just want to thank everyone again for their time today and for putting up with a little technology hiccups this morning. We made it through though, which is great. Please watch for a survey evaluation to be sent to your email in the coming days, and thank you so much for your time again. Enjoy the rest of your day.